The Galactic Council chamber floated in silent tension, a vacuum filled with everything but agreement. Humanity's final attempt at peace was unfolding, and no one dared breathe too loudly. The delegation from Earth, clad in diplomatic robes stitched with the flags of every surviving nation, entered the chamber as the last beacon of hope. This wasn't just about treaties or border disputes. It was about existence. Humanity had come a long way from their first stumbles into interstellar space. First contact with the Zaltari Confederation had been cautious, even promising. Trade opened, language barriers collapsed, and a fragile respect began to bloom. But when an asteroid rich in dark ionite was found in dispute space, diplomacy cracked. Skirmishes followed, outposts destroyed, then colonies, then cities. The Terran Accord tried to hold fast, uniting the fractured Earth factions into a single voice. But unity didn't stop the bleeding. Now, 5 years into the war, the Coalition's last diplomats faced a council. There was Ambassador Elin Merrick, weathered from years of negotiation, known for silencing militias with words. Beside her stood Dr. Arjun Rao, humanity's foremost xenolinguist and peace advocate, his genius often tempered by his unrelenting idealism. And at the rear, General Nadia Rel, armored not in plating but in scars and experience, a soldier turned stateswoman. The alien delegation towered, figuratively and literally. The Zaltari speaker was flanked by synthetic sentinels, its voice filtered through an automated translator that stripped emotion from every syllable. Surrender the Centauri Gate. Withdraw from Helion Drift. Decommission your deep space fleet. No preamble. No room for compromise. Merrick responded with practiced diplomacy, offering conditional withdrawal, resource sharing, joint oversight. The Zaltari did not flinch. Non-compliance will trigger full extermination protocol. This is your sole window for compliance. Their words weren't threats. They were declarations. The Council wasn't here to negotiate. They were here to dictate the terms of survival. Inside the chamber, an invisible pressure grew. Rao tried to reframe the situation, offering data, projections, peace probabilities. His voice cracked, not from fear, but from disbelief. How could being so advanced be so unwilling to listen? Rel said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on a silent countdown blinking on her neural interface. Earth's fleets were in final position. Diplomacy had a timer. Back on Earth, billions tuned into partial streams of the session. They didn't need translation. The body language, the rigidity of the Zaltari, the desperation in Merrick's tone, it said everything. Children watched their parents' eyes glaze over. Elders remembered wars long past and wondered if this one would be the last. As the final offer was placed on the table, a complete halt of all military activity in exchange for a phased resource-sharing treaty. There was a pause, a moment of real possibility. But then, the Zaltari representative merely tilted its head. Unacceptable. It gestured to its aides. Activate resolution protocol. Lights dimmed. Signals flashed. The conference feed abruptly cut. Warships in orbit began silent maneuvers. On every human control channel, a simple phrase appeared. Evacuate priority zones. Final protocol initiated. Back inside, Merrick stood frozen. This was never negotiation, she said. Rao nodded, devastated. It was theater. General Rel finally stepped forward, removing her diplomatic badge. Permission to engage? She asked. Merrick gave a solemn nod. God help us. And thus, the final act of diplomacy ended. Not with words, but with a signal relayed to every outpost, station, and ship bearing the Terran flag. Stand ready. Humanity had hoped for peace, pleaded for it, offered it again and again, but the galaxy had chosen its path. Now, humanity would walk the other one, with blood on its boots and fire in its chest. The diplomats had spoken. The soldiers would answer. When the final signal reached Earth's command hubs, there was no panic, no scrambling, just movement, precise, measured, absolute. Orders were acknowledged, systems engaged. From the lowest orbital skiff to the great shipyards orbiting Mars, humanity shifted from diplomacy to defense in seconds. The world didn't descend into chaos. It rose with purpose. Emergency protocols activated on every colony. Civilian transports launched in predetermined formations. Tactical uplinks connected every station, ship, and ground unit across light years. Earth's defense grid, once theoretical, now lit up like a storm. Dozens of sleeper ships were brought online. Stealth units emerged from black zones, and kinetic satellites were aimed at predetermined coordinates. The plan hadn't been a fight, but the plan to fight had always existed. Humanity was no stranger to desperation. History had forged it into something unbreakable. On the Lunar Defense Bastion, Commander Elias Vant gave the order to charge particle railguns. His crew didn't cheer, they executed. On the Neptune outpost, 2 young engineers reconfigured jump suppressors to flood with decoy signals. Improvisation wasn't an exception. It was a doctrine aboard the Dreadnought Resolute Blade, orbiting Titan. Captain Dion Kell reviewed fleet deployments. "Initiate Code Ember," she ordered, releasing 1,000 autonomous sub-drones across enemy approach vectors. No one celebrated. They just moved to the next task. In the human military, every second wasted was a life unpaid. Soldiers across different worlds donned adaptive armor, some barely out of training, others veterans of half a dozen planetary sieges. In Earth's lower orbit, Private Anthea Juno triple-checked her rail carbine. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from anticipation. She had trained for this moment. Now it was real. In the Martian canyons, elite rangers secured supply routes with precision of machines. On Ganymede, engineers flooded tunnels with coolant vapor to mask ground heat signatures from orbital scans. Humanity wasn't the biggest force in the galaxy, but it was, perhaps, the most practiced in adversity. Then came the first contact. It started with a tremor in the deep space comm net, a sudden silence in the Andromeda Gate Array. Seconds later, Station Delphi sent a final transmission. "We are breached. Casualties, complete systems compromise. Requesting," then static, aboard Resolute Blade. The tactical board bled red. Alien cruisers blinked into proximity space near outposts they shouldn't have known about. "They're using jump points we've never seen," the EXO reported. Captain Kell didn't flinch. "Engage perimeter assault pattern. Give them a welcome." The first shots were silent, invisible lances of plasma slicing through orbitals and patrol craft. But humanity struck back. Coil guns flared, mines detonated in carefully laid clusters, and kinetic slugs shattered enemy hulls. Every contingency had been considered. Nothing was perfect, but everything was prepared. At border outpost of Leon 7, a platoon of human troops found themselves cut off, encircled by Zaltari Biomex. Their commander, Sergeant Aiko Namura, gave a single order: hold no matter what. With only 7 soldiers, she held for 3 hours against 30 enemy units, using terrain, misdirection, and hand-forged plasma charges. Her last act was broadcasting the enemy's weak point frequencies to the broader network before the station was overrun. That data turned the tide in 12 engagements across nearby systems. Meanwhile, humanity's networked intelligence array, Project Scythe, came online in full. It redirected resources dynamically, assigned counterstrikes based on real-time losses, and allowed individual units to act with strategic independence. Where alien forces advanced linearly, humans adapted mid-conflict. No need for high command approval. Decisions were made at the edge, fast and fluid. But this wasn't just a war of weapons. It was a war of memory. Veterans remember the fall of Io, when 4 million were lost because of a signal delay. That mistake would not be repeated. Encryption layers now pulse with AI redundancy. Communications relays piggybacked on civilian networks. Civilians became couriers. Everything, everyone, became part of the defense. The battle wasn't clean. It wasn't glorious. It was hard, messy, brutal, aboard the supply frigate Crestfallen. 20 engineers gave their lives sealing a warp rift breach before it could detonate the main reactor. Their captain never ordered them to. They simply knew what was needed. On a transport vessel above Callisto, a group of children watched the stars flicker and disappear. The teacher holding their hands had once been a scientist. Now, she was a protector. Every soul mattered. Every action counted. Humanity didn't win every fight that day. Dozens of outposts fell. Thousands died. But the war didn't roll over Earth as expected. It met resistance so fierce, so intelligent, so utterly unwilling to collapse that it staggered. Because when soldiers stormed, it was not chaos. It was purpose. And Earth held, deep within the command core beneath Antarctica's frozen crust. The Terran Accord's High Council convened for the first time since the siege began. Lines once separating nations and ideologies had dissolved under necessity. Now only survival spoke. Every corner of human territory pulsed with urgency. But here, beneath ice older than civilization, a different task had begun, deciding humanity's next move. Not all wars are won on the front lines. Some are won by deciding how far you're willing to go. General Nadia Rel, now reactivated to full strategic command, stood before the holographic war board. Containment will not work, she said. They didn't come to push, they came to end us. We either take the initiative or we burn. The room bristled with debate. Some want to fall back, consolidate, protect what could be saved. Others argue for immediate retaliation. But Rel's plan was different. It wasn't about defense or revenge. It was about leverage. We strike at their myth, she said. The Zaltari believe we're weak, undisciplined, soft, that we lack the will to do what must be done. That belief has shaped their strategy. It's time to destroy it. Her plan had a name, Operation Glass Pulse. It would require something unprecedented, a coordinated, simultaneous counterstrike, not at the fleet, not at the council, but at the symbols of the enemy's power. Their AI war nodes, their mythic fleet carriers, their sacred archive stations that hadn't seen war in millennia, targets they never expected to be touched. Because humans weren't just soldiers, they were iconoclasts. Preparation began immediately. Deep Black units were pulled from ghost missions. Independent captains were contacted through encrypted channels, their ragtag ships outfitted with unstable tech. Each was handed a suicide mission with near-zero survival odds, and each one accepted without hesitation, not because they expected to win, but because they refused to lose. From asteroid fields near Alpha Mensi, a forgotten human stealth fleet emerged. Its flagship, Mourner's Call, was manned by former pirates, ex-marines, and AI constructs with experimental decision-making matrices. Their task: neutralize the Zaltari psychic relay station, the relay that coordinated entire waves of biomech deployments. Without it, the alien assault would fracture. They arrived cloaked, slipping past quantum tripwires, suppressing every trace of motion. And when they were close enough, they didn't fire missiles. They detonated themselves, shattering the station with a neutronium core wrapped in phase-distorting torpedoes. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't clean. But it worked. In the Helion Drift, a colony ship turned battleship rammed a Zaltari Dreadfort, one of their sacred constructs, sending it into a collapsing neutron star. The human crew broadcast their final moments into every known channel. You wanted submission. You earned defiance. The effect on the Zaltari front lines was immediate and devastating. Enemy formations staggered. Coordination collapsed. For the first time, they reacted instead of dictating. Human forces surged into the chaos with surgical aggression. At the same time, deep code linguists uploaded corrupted religious data into Zaltari philosophy servers. Not to hack, but to infect. The Zaltari viewed certain language structures as sacred. The subtle reprogramming introduced paradoxes, spiritual corruption that forced their priest generals to halt and cleanse their ranks. Human war had found a way to attack not just their ships, but their beliefs. The greatest blow came from a single freighter named Io's Echo. Manned by a skeleton crew and 3 AI tacticians, it faked a surrender, was taken aboard a Zaltari command arc, and detonated a fusion core that ruptured the arc's time-space shielding. The resulting collapse erased the ship and everything in a 5-kilometer radius from existence. No remains, no signal, just absence. The galaxy noticed. For the first time in generations, the Zaltari Council hesitated. Their envoys fell silent. Their war chants grew quiet. and other alien civilizations, many long subdued, watched with new eyes. What humanity had proven wasn't just defiance, it was unpredictability. Inflexibility was the Zaltari's pride. Adaptation was humanity's gift, but the cost was unbearable. The mourner's call was gone, so were over 3 dozen Black Ops teams. Civilian populations in exposed sectors had suffered heavily. For every symbolic victory, another home was lost. And yet, morale across human space didn't break. It surged, not because they loved war, but because they saw what they were fighting for the right to define themselves, for the right to endure without being reshaped, for the right to say no. That night, across Earth and its scattered colonies, bonfires were lit, not to celebrate death, but to honor it. Names of the fallen echoed through VR spheres and memory temples. Soldiers recorded final messages and returned to battle. Civilians volunteered to build, support, fight. Even as resources dwindled, resolve multiplied. In every shattered outpost, in every dark corner where survival seemed unlikely, the same signal was etched: we are not finished. And in some distant void, as alien admirals whispered about withdrawal and strategy, humanity didn't wait for their decision. They kept moving forward. Relentless, ruthless, alive. The Zaltari had underestimated something crucial. They had believed humanity's strength lay in its numbers, its fleets, or perhaps even its weaponry. But they had overlooked the most dangerous trait of all: humanity's ability to fight without hope, to persist in the face of inevitable destruction. Months had passed since Operation Glasspulse, and the war was no longer a matter of territories or battles. It had become something far more primal, a battle for the soul of humanity itself. The Zaltari were no longer merely defending their territories. They were now fighting to keep their superiority intact. Every victory humanity claimed added another crack in their illusion of invincibility. The psychological toll of war had shifted. No longer were humans just resisting. They were pushing, in every possible sense of the word. Colonies once devastated by the Zaltari invasion now fortified their defenses, with civilians training alongside soldiers. In every darkened bunker, in every makeshift armory, a new kind of warfare took hold. The resistance didn't just rebuild what was lost. They built something stronger, something impossible to predict: human ingenuity, human will. On the front lines, soldiers became legends. General Nadia Rel, once a diplomat in the quiet halls of the High Council, now commanded entire fleets with a combination of brutal strategy and audacious risk. Under her leadership, a ragtag fleet of civilian ships and battered war vessels had managed to break the Zaltari's hold on the Velos corridor, the heart of their operations. This victory wasn't a matter of advanced tactics or superior numbers. It was about strategy, improvisation, and a deep understanding of the one thing that could defeat the Zaltari: unpredictability. Human tactics were simple, yet brilliant. They didn't play by the rules. They didn't have rules. In every engagement, humans embraced the unknown, exploiting the Zaltari's inability to adapt to human will to survive. Their soldiers knew how to shift on a dime, how to take on enemies they had no business defeating, and how to turn every setback into fuel for their rage. Even when victory seemed impossible, human forces found ways to win. Not through sheer power, but through will. The Zaltari had no understanding of this. They believed themselves a superior race, with intellects far beyond that of humanity. But in the war of attrition, in the slow, grinding struggle for survival, it was the very unpredictability of human determination that became their greatest weapon. On Earth, in the final bastions of human civilization, the message was clear: no surrender, no retreat. Even as supplies dwindled, even as millions fell to the Zaltari assault, humanity refused to break. The survivors took their place as the inheritors of an old yet timeless tradition, to fight for their right to exist no matter the cost. It was on the edges of the belt, in the star-streaked dark, where the final spark of hope would ignite. The Zaltari had deployed their greatest fleet to crush the remaining resistance, an overwhelming force, one that could wipe out entire star systems in the blink of an eye. Yet even as they surged toward Earth's remaining defenses, the humans had one last trick to play. Every surviving fleet, every hidden warship, every last remaining fighter craft took to the stars, not in a desperate defense, but in a united strike aimed directly at the heart of the Zaltari fleet. Their target? The central hub, the single point where the Zaltari had calculated humanity's end. The Grand Arc, the heart of their vast, impenetrable power. For weeks, the fleet moved silently through deep space, slipping past enemy lines, evading detection by every conceivable means. This was no longer about size, strength, or firepower. It was about precision, about stripping away the pride of a foe who had thought themselves untouchable. And then, on the eve of the final assault, something unexpected occurred. The Zaltari fleet, in its arrogance, had grown complacent. They had predicted that humanity would fracture, that desperation would breed disarray. But they hadn't counted on unity, on the human capacity to rally behind a single purpose. When the human fleet emerged from the shadows, with every ship powered by that singular, desperate hope, the Zaltari were thrown into chaos. But it wasn't just the fleet that took the fight to them. It was the people, the civilians who had lived in the shadow of war, who had seen their cities burn and their loved ones lost, now fought with a fury no one could anticipate. From the most unlikely places, shattered homes, abandoned research stations, remote colonies, humans rose with a single cry: "We are not finished. We are not broken." The Zaltari's arrogance was their undoing. In their belief that they were the final word in galactic power, they had forgotten the most essential lesson. Humanity would never, ever be cowed. The final battle came in a flash of brilliance, a collective assault that was as beautiful as it was deadly. The Zaltari's fleet, unwieldy, massive, and overconfident, was sliced apart by the human onslaught. Every strike was a message: we will not yield. They fought not for victory, but for existence. When the dust settled, the Zaltari fleet was broken, the Grand Arc destroyed. And in the stillness that followed, when the chaos had finally subsided, a quiet realization dawned across the stars. The war was over. Humanity had won. It wasn't just because of their weapons, their strategies, or their tactics. It was because when everything else had failed, humanity had done what it did best. It refused to give in. In the face of total annihilation, humanity had fought with everything it had: its resilience, its spirit, its will to survive. And in doing so, they forged a new era, one where the galaxy would learn a simple truth. Humanity was not just a species. It was a force of nature,